Hi, you're listening to It Happened to Me, a rare disease and medical challenges podcast. The mission of our podcast is to support you, our listeners, and to create community as you confront the toughest challenges in life. All of us will experience health hardships. The real question is how we adapt. That's the focus of It Happened to Me, which wants to help you overcome limitations and live a full and satisfying life. Drawing on their own health challenges, co-hosts Cathy Gildenhorn and Beth Glassman interview guests who share stories and research to help you succeed in the face of difficult health obstacles. It happened to me. I'm not alone, and neither are you.
For most of his life, Craig Leppert has had to build his world around avoiding the sun. Craig lives with EPP, which is a rare genetic condition that can cause severe pain and swelling after just minutes of sun. As a result, he missed out on many everyday moments most people take for granted.
But Craig has also turned that experience into purpose. In 2017, he founded Shadow Jumpers, a nonprofit supporting individuals and families living with photosensitive conditions through resources, community, and meaningful experiences. In 2024, Shadow Jumpers launched Sun Escape, a free camp designed for photosensitive families so they can enjoy fun activities in a carefully sun-safe environment.
Joins us today to share what life with EPP has really been like, how it has shaped his everyday life, and how a recent clinical trial gave him a glimpse of more freedom and hope. Welcome to It Happened to Me today, Craig.
Yeah, I'm gonna be here.
Craig, let's start at the beginning. Tell us about your childhood and what growing up was like before you fully understood what EPP was. And when did you first realize your experience in the sun was different from other kids?
Yeah, EPP is an extremely rare condition, but ironically, the journey of growing up with EPP feels very common amongst patients. I was born in Hawaii. I grew up my father was in the military. I grew up on the Jersey Shore, so I never really lived in a smart place for someone that was allergic to this.
Right.
Yeah, but my father was in the military, so we bounced around a lot when I was young. And actually, when we lived in Maryland, I was outside at a kiddie pool outside my parents' apartment, just water in a hose, a blow up pool. And I started going nuts on my hands and face when I was 18 months old. And you cannot, explain yourself when you're that age. So
No.
my grandmother took me inside. I'm screaming bloody murder. And the next day I woke up and my hands looked like little boxing gloves. You didn't know where my knuckles started and my fingers began. And that really started about a 4 to 5 year journey where my family was really at a loss for answers, but just slowly over time knew that something was different outside and something seemed to get worser in the summer. So I think from a really young age, we started to realize something was different and went on this journey of being with a ton of doctors who had a ton of very weird ideas as to what was wrong.
Mhm.
Some thought I was allergic to hydrogen in the air. Crazy.
Wow.
Some thought I was allergic to chlorine or detergent, grass. But I knew from a young age that, you know, before my diagnosis, something was very, very unique. And particularly after getting diagnosed, you start to really put into perspective, even at a young age, just how outdoorsy everything
Yes.
is, or just how
Right.
sun adjacent.
How long did it take to get a diagnosis? When did you start on the journey and when did you get some answers?
I first saw symptoms when I was 18 months, so around there, but I didn't get properly diagnosed for another 3 to 4 years, which was very common back then. My parents often tell the story when they finally got a diagnosis, when we moved to New Jersey when I was about 5 or 6, that my mom went to a local library, as you did in the 90s, or the age of the internet, and she saw in one encyclopedia, a medical encyclopedia, there was a paragraph or two about EPP. That was as
My
much
goodness.
information was available at that time.
Wow.
These doctors that your parents took you to that came up with these different diagnoses.
It was your local pediatrician, just and they would send you off to
I see.
someone. So I got lucky when I moved to New Jersey. Yeah,
Right.
I didn't go to a specialist or anybody back then. I went to my local pediatrician who was the closest doctor in my area. And
Right.
great man. He just had happened to come from a conference where they talked about porphyria for
Really.
5 or 10 minutes. And the next week I walked into his office
Oh
and
my goodness.
he said, maybe this is it, and started on a journey. I went to Mount Sinai, got tested, my liver enzymes and
Oh,
bunch of other things, and then after getting that diagnosis, which was a bit of a relief finally in a weird way to finally know what's
yes.
wrong with your child, my mom then
Yes.
did that story where she went to the library after that and tried to get some information about this condition.
Believable.
That is amazing.
Can you describe what a reaction to sun exposure actually feels like for you? And how hard is it to explain that pain to people who just can't see it or
Yeah,
feel it?
I think what's if you were to ask that question to a ton of EPP patients, I think what's very telling is how violent they describe the reaction.
Oh,
5 to 10 minutes in the sun on a really bad day for me feels a combination of if you accidentally cut yourself with a knife, if you ever,
oh,
a really bad cut by accident, if you're, cutting vegetables or something, and you somehow mix that with the accidentally burning yourself on like a stove. Yeah,
oh, that's awful.
if those two terrible sensations somehow had a baby, that would be an
Oh,
EPP reaction. When I was in high school, I played high school sports and I broke my thumb playing football, but at the same time I burnt my hand from the sun. I had a reaction, and for 2
oh,
weeks I thought I just had a bad reaction because it hurt so much more than a broken bone before all the
really?
swelling and coloring went away and I realized my thumb.
Yeah, broken.
My goodness. So, can you explain what sort of everyday activities EPP forces you to avoid?
Obviously, there's the 100% sunny things that just as any child or anyone with a photosensitive condition had to miss out on. So growing up, I did not go to the beach. I did not go to summer camp. I think
I see.
I never went out for a fire drill in growing up.
Oh,
I knew where to go if there was a fire, but never
uh-huh.
instead of having to cover up and walk outside for 10 minutes and come back in, I just kind of sat at my desk and just prayed that this was a was a
So this
procedure and not the real
so
thing.
your teachers and the schools understood this condition and made allowances then.
Yeah, I was fortunate. I never went out for recess or gym class. I grew up in a
Well,
small town. I ended up landing in a small town in New Jersey, and it
I
was a
see.
kind of town where when you went to kindergarten and graduated high school with the same kids. So by
I
staying in
see.
there, by the time I got to middle school, I was known as the vampire in class.
My
Now,
goodness.
you mentioned covering up. Can you go outside as a child? Could you go outside if you covered up completely?
Yeah, so I think the big thing is you had to weigh of you didn't necessarily miss out on everything if
Right.
you made changes to your life. So, I would walk outside with a brim hat, wearing a hoodie with the hood on top, gloves, sometimes
Yes.
a
Yeah.
neck gaiter that would be pulled over my face. I kind of looked like I was gonna rob the place.
Yeah. So no sandals. So this meant you were wearing gloves, no sandals, and
Yeah, just,
a
jeans.
kerchief around your neck.
Yeah.
You really, yeah, you really were covered.
Yeah,
You
I mean,
really,
and that's a big thing of,
yes,
there there's different people who go different routes. So like, I call that like mix and matching. Like you try to mix everyday garments with things that
right.
can protect you from the sun. There's other times if you're gonna be outside for whatever reason for a large part of the day, I would wear much more high-end protective garments. Places like Cooley Bar, Solumbra, UV Skins, these companies that make specific gear for UV protection.
Yeah,
Those are the long brim hats with the flaps on the
Yeah.
side, like you're crossing the desert. And then going in a pool, if you were able to manage that, they had the longs, almost look like you were gonna go surfing with the full suit and
right,
a hat on
right.
top. So
So does sunscreen provide any help or relief?
there's a bit of debate. So with EPP, you're susceptible to all kinds of light. So really, even the amount that sunscreen does let in can still be a problem. I think things like zinc and other high
Uh,
end. I think what they do is, for a person with EPP, it's not like you go in the sun and then 2 minutes later you have that violent reaction. There is a
mm,
bit of a gray area where once you feel a reaction coming on, you have about like 5 minutes to get out of the sun, and that
I see.
that pain
Oh,
will go away within 30 minutes or so. I call it like a warning sign, like a trigger warning. So I think sunscreen and things like that, what they do is they'd probably give you an extra buffer of 5 to 10 minutes to get out of the sun. Just wearing sunscreen by itself on a sunny day, you'd still get ripped to pieces.
Kathy and I were talking about that even there's sun exposure through a car
Yes.
that people we're a lot older than you are, Craig, Kathy. And,
Not you ladies.
but people get skin cancers.
Yep.
And we've talked about that on the left side of your face because you're driving, so that the predominance of it on your left side because that's exposed right to the sun as you're driving. It's remarkable how we are exposed. And the other place where sun exposure can really be treacherous as far as cancer is concerned is your eyelids. Dermatologists and eye doctors are very carefully looking at our eyelids because it is an area that is capable of causing cancer of the skin. So this is
Yeah.
something that we all think about in some way.
What I would say is what EPP has done for me is it really does put on notice just how many sun, adjacent places you are. An EPP person has to every room they go into, everything that they do for a living, they might not be in direct sunlight, but they're always clocking where the sun is and they're always
I
clocking
see.
what they might have to do if things go sideways. And
I see.
stuff like being in a car or being next to a window on a sunny day,
Mm-hmm.
or
Right?
even, you might be under the shade of an awning, but you don't realize that the sun is bouncing off of concrete and glass and all
That's
these
right.
things.
That's
So many
right.
of so many patients with DPP have believe it or not, will say that they have a tougher time in the winter than they do the summer. It's because
Oh, the
the snow
glare.
bounces off of every
Uh-huh.
area. So
Uh-huh.
it's just whether you are, a little bit older than me, as you ladies are, or if you have EPP, or just you might be susceptible to sunburn. You really don't understand that the sun is everywhere that you go. That jerk keeps rising every day.
You It's really amazing because you've reminded me in my youth when I used to ski.
Yep.
Yes, and getting sun on my face, getting actually burned on my face. I had forgotten about that. So, gee, you really have to be very aware. And I guess this comes as you mature with the condition. I'm just wondering, so your family had to learn about this. How did they support you through this? I mean, the emotional issues alone, let alone keeping you safe, physically safe.
Whether it was set in a room or just established over time, my family was very, very adamant that we were going to have a family dynamic and a life that was going to be the same whether we were allergic to the sun or not. And sometimes that meant going on very sunny vacations and pushing our limits. But
I see.
I think the two things my family did great was they really were going to make sure that we could not use my sister also has EPP,
Really?
but we were going to really, my family was very adamant that being allergic to the sun was not going to be an excuse to not try things or do things that other people were going to do. And I think
did either your mother or your father have EPP or just you and your sister?
no, so for EPP, one partner needs to have, for lack of a better word, the defected gene, and
Right.
another partner needs to have a SNP gene, where that can kind of like, for the people listening, kind of like locks in place, like almost like a key.
Yes.
So that's why it's
Yeah.
very rare. My parents grew up next door to each other as high school sweethearts, so it's kind of romantic.
Oh,
Besides for making sure, no matter what, that we were going to do what every kid was going to do, whether we liked it or not. My family was also very supportive in letting me the hard way figure out my limits and to push myself and to have a lot of trials and tribulations. I think what you find is it's really hard for parents. The EPP and a lot of these photosensitive conditions are genetic. So in
mhm.
some ways, your child is in pain and your child can't do things, and you as a parent feel somewhat guilty because you gave this
Yes,
to your
you
even though you
exactly
don't have
right.
symptoms yourself. So
Yes.
a lot of parents, because of that, are very protective of their children. They make the world very
Mhm.
small for their
Yeah.
child.
So
So
that brings me to this question. What does living with EPP look like on a practical level day to day? And how much planning, caution, mental energy goes into just doing things that most people take for granted?
Yeah, I think it goes back to, like I said, is what you realize quickly is the sun is everywhere. So I think for an EPP
Hmm.
person, it's constantly planning and prepping what my day is going to look like. For an average person, think about yourself, right? You wake up, you maybe sit outside to drink your coffee, you commute to work, you might sit by a window in your cubicle, you go to lunch, maybe you're outside, you come home, drive home, you go get the mail. On the weekend, you want to go see friends, you want to work out, you want to run errands. Like so much of those things are the sun is there at all times. So
Yeah.
And
that's
you mentioned you played sports. What would that look like?
I played football outside when I was in high school. So I covered up head to toe, similar to how I would dress. I had a tinted visor to cover my face. I had a neck guard underneath. I wore
Wow.
long sleeves and gloves and long pants. It was extremely hot at all
I
times.
was going to.
But my father, when I was in high school, who's the man? He's my hero. Between my sophomore junior year, he started a big fundraiser to raise money so we could play football games at night with certain
Isn't that great?
so we
Wow.
raised
Yeah.
$225,000. So
Oh,
our high school football field was lit. So we played.
let's lit. Oh,
Yeah.
isn't
So
that
besides for
fabulous?
practice, we got lucky to play all of our games the end of my high school career at night.
Oh, at night.
Oh, is that
Isn't
fabulous?
that sensational?
Yeah.
That is sensational.
And then you didn't have to get all dressed up.
Not for the games. No, not at night. No.
Very
I
good.
was wondering, with your father being in the military, could he request certain, locations that might be more beneficial for you?
He was in and out fast. So by the time I got
I
diagnosed
see.
in New Jersey, he was in the reserve. So
I see. He was
yeah.
in
Gotcha.
the.
How has EPP affected your social life, like friendships and dating, social events, travel, even your career choices?
Yeah, I mean, Twilight was a big movie when I was in college, so that helped me. But no, I mean, I
Great.
think it's been such a unique thing to bring into friendships and relationships. I'm married now, but I live in Los Angeles. I my day job is
Oh,
I work in the entertainment industry along with the nonprofit work that I do. So moving out here was a unique experience. But you
Yeah.
just, I think what you do is, and we'll talk a lot more about this too as we talk about the kids that we help and the patients and the things we do. But you can really let your photosensitivity and your EPP dictate your life, or you could find a way to get
Work with
creative
it.
and get around it. So I
Yeah.
was always very upfront with friends and relationships and social events and travels. There's some things that are worth adapting for, and some things that you just kind of say, hey, I'll see you when the sun goes down.
Is your sister as well adjusted as you seem to be with these challenges?
100%. I think that's all a credit to my parents. I really think how much you deal with your photosensitivity and
mm.
EPP is how you think about it and how you react to it at a young age. And my parents just set a great example for us, though they weren't photosensitive themselves. They just were not going to let this dictate, our set of circumstances. And we've really attacked it ever since.
But at the same time,
Oh,
they had to be respectful of any limitations you might have in terms of exposure.
Yeah, I think there was always we're gonna give ourselves the best chance at being successful. You go to Disney World and you plan and plan and plan, but for so many reasons it could go sideways. And when it
yep.
does, and someone's in the hotel room the rest of the trip, you can't be mad at your child. You have to just kind of lean in and
Go
let
with
go.
it.
But just the idea that we were put in positions to push ourselves and push our limits so much growing up really created the person that I am today. And we try to instill that to our younger people.
Well,
Yeah.
I tell you, you are really a great example, and I wondered if you would share with us if there was a special moment when you decided that you were going to do more than just manage your symptoms, that you were going to pay it forward, as we say.
Yes. So me and my family, after we raised money for our high school lights, we had like not even
Yes.
15 minutes of fame. I think we had like 2 minutes of fame.
Uh-huh.
Uh, we were featured on a few publications and media outlets. I was on the Dr. Oz show, which was really cool
Oh,
back in the
good.
day.
That's very cool.
Depending on your political affiliation, we've
Right,
gone,
right, right.
it's either gone good or bad since then
Yeah.
for Dr. Oz.
We're
But
with you, don't worry. Yeah.
but that was a very, I was on Mystery Diagnosis on the Discovery Channel. But from that, a lot of people reached out on Facebook to me and my family and and just wanted to share stories and connect and talk about their experience. And it was very, I was very taken back by how maybe unique and different our family really viewed living with EPP compared to the people we were talking to. What I mean by that is, there was a lot of like letting the condition dictate their life, letting the condition dictate how they're going to raise their kids. And that always kind of stuck with me. And then years later, I moved to Los Angeles, and you graduate college and you write this, big Facebook post, as was the thing back then. And I'm moving to LA and I'm going to work in TV and entertainment. And a lot of people that were in our community kind of had a weird reaction to it. They kind of were like, well, that's great, but how could you live there? Like, why would you want to do that? Like, it's so sunny there. Like, what's the point?
Mhm.
Again, kind of being like, "Oh, that's a little different. I didn't expect that." And then really the catalyst for your question, it was a few years into living in LA. I was on the internet, I was on Facebook, and there was a woman who had posted about her son who had EPP. He was 16 years old, and he really wanted to be a mechanic. That was like his dream, I guess, to own his own mechanic shop. And for whatever reason, the entry level for that is you work at another mechanic shop and you park the cars. So Beth, you might pull up to get your oil changed. You get out the car. This kid gets in, pulls it around. He pulls it back for you when it's done. This mother just believed that the compound exposure of doing that for her
Uh-huh.
kid in a day was going to be too much for him, and he
Right.
could not try. And oh my God, woe is me! Isn't this so bad? Our lives suck.
Uh-huh.
And everyone in the comments that had EPP was like, "Yeah, our lives are so bad, and like it sucks, and we have to all give up on our dreams." Like, paraphrasing. And
Right,
I was
right.
like, "These people are crazy," and like, and so I was like, I could either sit here and write and push back on a keyboard and say like, no, 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 or what could we have done as a community to pull all the reasons why this kid would have said no and give up on his dream. And maybe if he had stuck with it, he would realize it's not that bad, or it's not going to last forever, so it's worth it to kind of be in the mud on this tough moment in his life with the son, because good things are coming. And that was really the thing
That
that
was
got
it.
my mind
Uh,
churning to think of, what would that look like in for as an organization? What would that look like to help people do big things in the sun, or pursue, big, big things in the sun?
That is a fabulous story that the mother's dream for her son is really basically his happiness. That's what all
Mm.
mothers want for our children. We
Yeah.
just want our children to be happy, and she was afraid that he couldn't do it. And what you said was, let's figure out a way he can. Let's
Yeah, and
not say
I
no, let's say yes.
correct, and I feel
Uh,
terrible. Like I never found. I don't remember who that mom is or the
right?
son is. I ended up going into like the abyss, but
Right,
I think
right.
about that family
No,
all the time.
but you have changed the trajectory of other people, and that's what brings me to ask you about shadow jumpers and what need you were trying to fill with that.
Yeah, I think, well, Shadow Jumpers is a nonprofit that helps families in North America living with all photosensitive conditions try things they've always wanted to do in the sun, or assist making their life with the sun on a day-to-day level better. So, a lot of times what that is, we help families go on sunproof vacations, all expenses
Mm,
free. We help families that maybe tried to do an experience in the sun on their own and weren't successful. We help them redo that experience.
oh
What
my
comes to
goodness.
mind is, there was a child we helped years ago who just wanted to collect seashells at the beach,
Yeah,
and that did not go well. So we
right.
helped the family set up this, like, this tent, and get a special, area in Myrtle Beach to collect seashells and really have a sun
Oh,
safe experience.
wow.
So,
Isn't that wonderful?
yeah, we help families, tint their cars. We help families tint their homes. We help the family renovate their basement to be like this sun-safe sanctuary for this child who was going through liver treatment with her EPP.
Oh my.
We help families acquire sun-safe vehicles. We really try to be, there's so many great organizations out there that it seems like they help you with diagnosis and all the medical aspects. And there's so many great things coming down the pipeline with those organizations for treatment and disease and cure. We're not, we don't want to be any of that at Shadow Jumpers. We want to be the unique voice that is like making it a positive impact on living with
Yes.
these conditions until you might not have to anymore. So, we
Mm,
always say that, great medical advancements in these conditions are coming, but they're not here
right,
tomorrow. So we might as well
right.
be living with the circumstances we have today. So we try to
Yeah.
do that in various ways.
Craig, you are a force.
Yeah,
You
you
are
really are.
really.
I'm gonna record that and play that.
Yeah,
for myself.
second.
Yeah,
It's
I don't
about-
say things I don't mean, and you
Yes,
really
no, she
are.
doesn't.
Your optimism and positivity are just brimming through the mic. I mean, it's really fantastic.
But tell us about Sun Escape Camp. I'm so curious. What does it mean to create a space where kids with extreme sun sensitivity can just play and have fun and feel like normal kids?
We have a 4-day, 3-night experience called Sun Escape, which is a photosensitive safe camp. It's in partnership with our friends at the United Porphyrias Association, a great medical based nonprofit for all types of porphyria. Years ago, there was this amazing camp called Camp Sundown. It was in upstate New York, and it was a place first of its kind for people with EPP and XP and these very severe photosensitive conditions where families could go hang out. They slept all day and played all night. There was an indoor pool. It was really great. And then during COVID, that facility unfortunately closed down. And so
Oh,
a
I
couple
see.
years, yeah, it sucks. And so a couple years
Yeah.
later, me and the great Kristen Whedon, who is over at the UPA, we were like, it feels like there's a void, there's a hole in our community for young people to get together and bond over their conditions and to have fun, similar to what this camp was. And that's really what Sun Escape was born out of. It takes place for 32 photosensitive families at Victory Junction, which is this amazing facility in Randleman, North Carolina, that really horseback riding, archery, zip lining.
how do they do outdoor things in a photosensitive way?
So most of the activities I just told you, because of the camp can tinker its activities to really any hardship. So a lot of those activities are already indoors. So
Right.
what we do is we show up and we add another layer of protection. You know, we put 100% UV coverings over all the windows of each
That was my
facility.
question. I was wondering,
Yeah.
can they have windows with that?
Yeah, so we cover 99% of the windows. You know, we're working on covering like a few that are up top. But and then we have a shuttle bus that gets our campers from facility area to facility area. That bus is completely shaded. And then we use exterior sun safe lighting to light up the field and the pool area and the fishing area at night.
So at your home, would you need this photosensitive covering on the windows at your house?
Yeah, not necessarily for me, but for a lot of the conditions that we support, they do have
Okay.
coverings over all the windows. You know, and particularly our XP families, which for XP they have they cannot effectively repair DNA damage caused by UV light. So essentially, like any exposed area for any amount of time can lead to not only extreme sunburning, but also like can create skin cancer right on that affected area right away. Yeah, so those kids, their homes are completely covered, their lives, they're covered 24/7. So, you know, ironically, we just finished our 3rd year of camp. Every year that is more of a success, the more severe of child comes to camp, which is a blessing that they think of us as safety enough, but that causes us to have, yeah, it causes us just to have to up our
Wow.
safety even more every year.
Yeah.
This is
Yeah.
phenomenal. Similar to what Beth just asked, are there moments from this camp experience that really stick with you, that really encapsulate why you did this and really, in your
Yes.
mind, made you
Yes,
feel
there
like
was
oh, God.
the biggest moment I think in 3 years was our camp this year. We had our pool night. So we have a pool period, a great outdoor pool that's, you know, the sun goes down, and we did that from 7 to like 9:30. For those XP kids who I just mentioned who are the most severe, they stayed covered until like 8 o'clock just to be
Okay.
safe. It was shaded and stuff, but these parents of these kids, they have their light meters, and they all agreed at like 7:45, 8 o'clock. Okay, it's safe enough. And these kids are already in the pool, fully protected, fully covered. They
Right.
have the face shield and everything. And so the kids were like so excited they get to take off. And as they're doing it, all the other kids at camp take notice and they start chanting and counting down. It's just yeah, like you get emotional thinking about it because it's just
I do. I'm getting emotional.
Just hearing about it.
yeah, because it's just, you know, you're at a place in which like in all other environments, just by human nature, those kids would stick out and be very different. And it's a place in which every kid and every parent there understood exactly what those kids were thinking and going through, and leaning into the positivity of that moment. I don't know if everyone was crying or everyone was just, stuck in the cool
Yes.
wet, but it was a good combination
Yes.
of both.
I could just imagine, because that's all you want is for your child to feel normal. Children want to be like every other child and to be given that opportunity. What a beautiful,
Oh,
beautiful.
yeah, we pay for everything.
Absolutely.
We cover all the cost of travel and all. It doesn't cost a
Oh,
dollar for any
Oh,
any.
really?
thank you. What a
Isn't that
wonderful thing
great?
to be
Oh
doing.
my God.
Thanks.
So
Wow.
I wanted to ask you, you recently joined a clinical trial, and we here on the podcast have talked to a lot of folks that have been in clinical trials, and sort of how they made the decision to do it, and what they thought the outcome was. Do you mind telling us a little bit about your thought process going into the clinical trial and what your hopes were?
I feel so fortunate, but just speaking of EPP specifically, like EPP's been around since the 1960s when it was discovered, but
Uh,
we're in a great fortunate time to be born when I was born, where now every treatment and everything that people have been waiting generations for has come out now. So
oh,
I think first and foremost, when you could always be afraid in a clinical trial, just you don't know what would happen, but
yes.
feeling such a sense of community and importance to my community to push that forward, I was going to be a part of all these clinical trials and great treatments, no matter what, just because the more data out there, the more good could come from it. But of course, I would hope for wanting to be able to experience peace of mind outside in the sun and to do things that,
Hmm.
for lack of a better word, most other people, most normal, unquote, normal people in the
Yes.
sun, day
Right.
walkers, as I call them,
Daywalkers. Love that.
Day
would
walker.
do.
That's
And
great.
I'm very, very comfortable with my set of circumstances with the sun and my EPP. So it's not like there's a lot of people that you'll talk to that when it comes to these clinical trials, they're like, oh, I just don't feel like I can live without this thing going away. Never thought that, but I'd certainly a life in the sun is better to experience more things in life not in the sun. So I had hoped to just get some experiences in the sun that I hadn't gotten to this.
Well,
And how
after
did it
it's,
turn out?
yeah,
How did it turn out?
Yeah, so I got at first I got the placebo in this
I see.
study, which is I have been in certain clinical trials for the last 10 years, and I've
Oh,
gotten the placebo every time.
oh, for
uh,
good God.
Last
What's
year
the
at a conference, someone gave me a shirt that said "Placebo Man." But the best part about Bitopertin, which is by far the greatest thing that's happened to the EPP community, when the trial period, when that stage of the trial, that phase ends, you get put on open label, open extension, which means everyone gets the real drug until certain benchmarks happen or the drug comes to market. So I've been on Bitopertin for about a year and a half,
Okay.
and that's been just really remarkable. Like I said before, I live in Los Angeles. I've been here for about 10 years. Feels like I've been here for 6 months because I get to go out and try these things that I never thought was possible.
wow, that's
So you're
remarkable.
able to spend more time in the sun, and the repercussions are milder,
Yeah. So
or
I have had in a year and a half, I have not had a time limit on when I have to go inside. I've had
Wow.
really?
yeah,
That's
I've
Well,
had no.
that's life altering. That is life
Yeah.
altering.
No, the one it's good. The one negative is, I don't like the beach. I don't know what you
Uh,
guys like about the beach. I live in Southern California. It's so overrated. I say this and everyone
That's so
you're
funny.
sweaty, the water's too cold, you get
Yeah,
sand and everything, and you just lay
yeah,
there. Like I feel
right.
embarrassed I hyped that up in my head for so long.
well, after this type of freedom and liberation, what was it like to see the FDA deny accelerated approval? How
Yeah.
did you
So
process it?
Yeah, so Disc Medicine and Bitopertin were approved a voucher by the FDA to essentially accelerate the approval process. And, I, I would just say, with respect to the FDA and to data and the process, if Bitopertin and Disc Medicine didn't qualify for approval through this program, then I just don't understand what the reason for the program is in the first place.
Right,
The
right.
data is overly sound. The testimonials of people like myself is overly sound. A lot of people may be listening and say, well, you don't want to accelerate a drug because you don't know the long-term health ramifications. The uniqueness about bitopertin is the drug itself was developed years ago for schizophrenia, or I believe it's schizophrenia, but fact of the matter is it was developed for something
It
else
was
that
a
had
repurposed drug, in other
yes,
words.
but
Yeah. So
it
the
had
drug
gone
had been
through
on the shelves, had already been approved. The
I had gone
path.
through clinical trials, yeah, so but it had gone through
Yes.
the health and safety measures of
Yes.
many clinical trials. So, we live in a unique world where medicine and approvals is a little bit more of a hot button topic than it should be. But I think what gives me peace of mind is the drug is gonna go through the normal approval process in the spring of next year, and
Okay.
I if it doesn't get approved then with all the data and all the backing, me and you are gonna have a much different tone of this
Uh-huh.
conversation. But,
Well,
by
you
all
got to
accounts
get those people you work with in the TV
yeah.
industry and
Right.
get them motivated to make a noise, you know?
Yeah, but
Uh,
I think what it is after, after the dust settles on being
right.
frustrated by that process, it feels a matter of if and not when
When?
bitopertin will be
Uh-huh.
on the market, but look, I would say you know, the FDA might say to us, "Hey, another year with more data, what's the harm in that?" And I would just push back and say, "Well, that's another year of summer
Yes.
months and birthdays and
Right.
vacations that
Right.
these families and these patients don't get to go on in a way in which they could with peace of mind." And you
Yes.
only get so many of those in your life. You only get
Right.
a sweet spot of those being able to be a certain way with your kids or in college or on certain, aspects of your life. So it's unfortunate. My heart goes out to disc medicine. There's a lot of great people over there, but our hope is we're having a much different conversation in the spring.
You mentioned children, and I have to ask, do you have children?
No, not yet.
Good luck with all that. But I'm wondering if you and when you do have kids, do you have to worry about or do you plan ahead for the possibility of EPP? And is there anything you can do with the child's environment so that you feel they'll be more comfortable in
No,
going forward?
yeah, I mean, me and my wife have talked about it. I mean, you could go to a gene counselor and kind of get your data and your partner's
Hmm.
data and get prepared of the percentages or the chance of that happening. I think, similar to a lot of people, there's been nothing about EPP that's gonna be like, "Oh, I can't bring a child into a world with this."
Right.
So I think I'm willing to play let's have a baby and then figure it out.
And see what happens. Yeah.
There's a lot of families that I've worked with that parent has EPP and their kids have it as well. My parents and I were so connected, but you're even more connected if you have
With
the
you.
same
Yeah.
condition as your child. So I
Hmm.
think I think what we'll be able to do, which is great, is just at a very, very young age be able to get him or her tested and get away of the land early. And then of course we'll do all the different things. I think what's really great though, when you're a baby, whether you have EPP or not, all babies seem like they're covered up from the sun.
Yes,
They
Yeah.
have
they
those
are.
big hats.
They are.
That's,
There's a market there if I want it.
yeah, very
For
true.
listeners who may not know much about EPP, what do you wish more people understood about the urgency of treatment and access for rare disease communities?
When it comes to EPP, the thing I wish people knew more about is just how rare EPP is. So a huge thing that in our community that we're trying to get better at, you think about, hey, there's a need to cover up or there's a need to retrofit your home. There's just as big of a need to educate medical professionals of
Mm,
what EPP is. I just talked to you earlier about going to doctor after doctor after
yeah.
doctor and
Yeah.
just having years of not knowing what's going on. That is really, really common. It's getting better,
Yes.
especially because of the internet. Doctors are great. I do think that sometimes with a doctor, it's if I haven't seen it or if I haven't read it, then I have
Right.
some skepticism to it. And
Yeah.
you just want to
Yeah.
be able to point people in the right direction to get a proper diagnosis. Going back to it is like rare diseases and treatment for those diseases, it's really, really hard to get a lot of people to rally and for those things to move quickly just because nothing in this world is done for free,
Right.
even if out of the goodness of your heart. So just
Yeah.
getting more and more people to push agendas forward and to get research pushed forward and to get treatment pushed forward because there's even though so many little people in the grand scheme of things will be affected, we really need these treatments and we just don't want to be hindered by due process and for being, small in numbers.
Right. Right.
We talk to people all the time who are in the rare disease community, and each one is siloed. But when we talk about that, if we group all the rare disease communities together, we have about 20% of the population. So there are a lot of people walking around with what we would call a rare disease. And they all have gone through the experience you went through, doctor to doctor, test to test, and just how difficult it is for the children, for the parents, how prolonged a process it is in diagnosis. It's a very difficult one. And I'm glad your parents were, it sounds like your mother was really the lifesaver here and going to the library before the age of the internet. I mean,
Right.
how miraculous that was that she was able to give a clue and that your doctor had, a sort of serendipity been at a conference where he had heard it mentioned in passing. And so it didn't seem so out of place. But there is a lot of luck a lot of times in the diagnosing of a disease. But the more that you publicize this as you have, the better chance other young people will get diagnosed. You've done such a terrific job. I am so taken by you. I
Thanks.
really, and I have to say, I think that almost by having this rare condition. And I wonder if you could talk about what it did for you as far as you're so strong and positive and energetic, what it did to teach you about resilience and joy. How did that impact who you are today?
Yeah, for whatever reason, when I was really young, I came to this realization that, no matter how like sad or disappointed I was in like my set of circumstances, that my body wasn't going to be like, haha, or you're good now, like you're cured. Like that just wasn't going to happen. So I had to lean in into making, what I got work. I think, there's so much power in, your diagnosis, with rare people of like, you really
Yes.
can let that diagnosis there's power in it. So you can let that power
Yeah.
overtake you and dictate every decision and everything that you do, and no one's really gonna push back on you. They'll pity you in some ways, but you can harness that power and you can use it to propel you in ways that you never thought were possible. I have something that is so rare and unique that people, when they hear you say that, they kind of look at you and go, are you serious? Are you messing with me?"
Uh-huh.
It
Right.
Right. Right.
sounds supernatural. It sounds fake, and that's something that, like, in an age where people wanna be so authentic and they wanna stick out and they wanna be this, like, one of one
Yes.
person,
Yes.
EPP is something that, like, you cannot buy, you cannot learn, you cannot, make it your personality, like, you have to be born with it, and that is such a blessing. I often say, EPP has made me such a better person, and
Oh,
I'll do so much more good in this world as, as an activist, but also just as a person to my neighbor and the people I know because I have EPP than having not, So I truly feel
what,
lucky.
We really find that in talking to people, those who take on this advocacy role, which is what you've done,
absolutely.
it is helpful not only for those who are living with it, but also for that person that advocates. And it seems to, as what you're saying, it's made you stronger.
Yeah, I think so. I think, when you give yourself, it's not fun.
No,
Advocacy
no,
work isn't
nothing.
fun.
No, it's not.
It takes
It's
the life
not.
out of you, but I
Yes,
think it's one of those where I think advocacy work, it kind of forces you to really get in the trenches of your community and to talk to a lot of people and hear a lot of stories and have to be there for a lot of people. And I think it really makes you reflect on wanting to pull your community forward and to do whatever it takes to change the messaging and the thought process of your community. And that really takes you having to define and refine the way that you see your disorder every day.
yes.
Uh,
What would you say to a child or a parent of a child who's just been diagnosed? What
You
would
know,
you
I,
say to them?
Uh, yeah, I would answer that in 2 parts. I say with to a child that, like, everyone around you is gonna treat you and your disorder the way that you treat you and your disorder.
Mm,
If you think it's the coolest, unique thing and you can roll with the punches, everyone's gonna do that. If you think it's this scarlet letter and this thing that you don't wanna talk about or think about or be associated with, people are gonna treat you and your diagnosis that way. and that takes a lot of time to learn that, particularly when you're young. Kids are tough. Kids will point you out. Kids will, it's in their nature, but like I
Yes.
said, there is the way that you treat it and think of it is very contagious to other people. And I think to a parent, the hardest thing you could do, whether your kid is photosensitive or not, is to let them go out and get beat up by the world and learn things and get and still stand. And you got to let your kid kind of learn some things with his condition on his own, and just be there to support and never say I told you so, and just to keep pushing them forward, because what you're doing now with your child is going to dictate how they're going to act in their 20s and 30s and 40s. And all we want is for our kids to live better lives than us. So
Yes.
Absolutely. And thank you. That's great advice, not just for kids with EPP, but for parents and families facing any challenge. It's a
Yes.
really good mindset and a really good way, a tool in the toolkit of how to live the best life you can with whatever cards you're dealt.
I think so. Yeah, everyone's got hardships. Everyone's got going through something, and
Yep.
I just hope to be a great. Me and Shadow Jumpers just hope to be a great rallying cry for photosensitivity, and a place where people can come and lean in and think being allergic to the sun is at least a very unique and fun thing to have on your life resume.
I so hope that you will forward to us links for shadow jumpers, links for Sun Escape Camp, for any other resources that you think would be helpful for kids and families facing EPP or for any rare genetic diseases in the community. Anything you feel would be helpful, because our audience, I know, would appreciate that. They'll appear in our show notes at the end of the conversation. But Craig, thank you so much for joining us today and for inspiring us with your approach to life and for sharing your story so openly. Your work has made a meaningful impact in the EPP community and created hope, connection, and joy for so many peoples. You have for so many families. You have so much to be proud of, and we thank you.
Thank you guys. So happy to be here, and thank you for taking interest in all of us little vampires out here. We appreciate it.
It was
Oh,
great to meet you, Craig.
Pleasure's all
thank
mine.
you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of It Happened to Me. We encourage you to learn more at ithappenedtomepod.com. Please use the contact form on our website to submit your guest suggestions, comments, questions, ideas, and feedback for the show. You can also email us directly at ithappenedtomepod@gmail.com. We would really appreciate it if you can leave us a 5-star rating and review on your podcast app like Apple or Spotify. This helps others in the rare disease and medical challenge community find us. It Happened to Me is created and hosted by Cathy Gildenhorn and Beth Glassman. I'm Keira Deneen from DNA Today, and I serve as our executive producer and marketing lead. Amanda Andrioli is our associate producer. Ashlyn Anokian is our graphic designer. And remember, it happened to me. I'm not alone, and neither are you.